Sarah Mitchell stood before the mirror in her suburban Boston home, smoothing down her cream blazer for the 100th time that morning. The autumn sunlight streaming through the bay window caught the silver strands in her auburn hair, battle scars from years of fertility treatments and dashed hopes. Her husband Michael, a successful software developer, appeared behind her, his reflection showing the same mixture of anticipation and nervousness that had become their constant companions. "The social worker will be here in 20 minutes, Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of the adoption paperwork spread across their mahogany dining table. The house, usually so quiet it echoed, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. Every corner had been cleaned, every surface polished, every room prepared for the scrutiny that would determine if they were worthy of becoming parents. The preparation had been Sarah's domain. While Michael buried himself in coding and client meetings, she had transformed their third bedroom from a home office into a nursery. The walls, now a soft sage green, displayed whimsical woodland creatures. A white crib stood ready, its mobile of silver stars catching the light. Sarah had spent countless nights in the rocking chair by the window, imagining holding their child, singing lullabies to an empty room. As the doorbell chimed, Sarah's heart leaped. The social worker, Ms. Thompson, carried more than just a briefcase. She carried their future. The interview passed in a blur of questions about their support system, their parenting philosophy, their financial stability. When Ms. Thompson finally smiled and said, "I think you'll be hearing from us very soon," Sarah felt tears welling up. 2 weeks later, they received the call that would change everything. A little girl named Emma, just 3 years old, was waiting to meet them at New Horizons Adoption Center. The drive there was silent, Michael's knuckles white on the steering wheel, Sarah's hands clasped tightly in her lap. Emma was smaller than Sarah had imagined, with honey blonde curls and eyes the color of spring violets. She sat in the playroom, carefully arranging wooden blocks into towers, her tiny face scrunched in concentration. When she looked up and smiled, Sarah felt the world shift on its axis. "Hi, Emma," Sarah said softly, kneeling down beside her. "I love your tower. May I help you build it higher?" Emma nodded, pushing a red block towards Sarah with serious deliberation. For the next hour, they built castles together, while Michael watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. The paperwork was signed with trembling hands, and suddenly, impossibly, they were a family. The drive home was filled with Emma's soft humming from the back seat, punctuated by her delighted gasps at every dog they passed. Sarah kept glancing back, afraid this was all a dream that would dissolve in the late afternoon light. Michael drove carefully, unusually quiet, his jaw tense despite the miracle in their car. At home, Emma explored her new room with wide-eyed wonder, touching each stuffed animal as if greeting old friends. She lingered over the bookshelf, pulling out "Goodnight Moon" and holding it up hopefully. Sarah's heart melted as she settled into the rocking chair, Emma climbing in her lap as naturally as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. The first few days passed in a whirlwind of discovery. Emma loved strawberry yogurt, but despised bananas. She could spend hours watching squirrels in the backyard. Her laugh, when it finally came, sounded like silver bells. Sarah documented every moment, every milestone, while Michael seemed to orbit their new life from a distance, his smiles not quite reaching his eyes. 1 week into their new life, Sarah was preparing Emma's favorite dinner, mac and cheese with tiny pieces of broccoli hidden throughout, when she heard it. The scream from the bathroom shattered the peaceful evening, followed by Chael's voice, raw with emotion. "We have to send her back." Continued in the next section. Chapter 2. The shattered piece. Sarah's wooden spoon clattered against the stovetop as she ran toward the bathroom, her heart thundering in her chest. Steam billowed from the open door, carrying the scent of lavender bubble bath and something else. Fear, thick and cloying. Emma sat in the tub, surrounded by floating rubber ducks, her eyes wide with confusion. Michael stood frozen, his face ashen, staring at something on Emma's shoulder blade. A birthmark, shaped like a crescent moon, dark against her pale skin. "Michael, what are you talking about?" Sarah's voice shook as she grabbed a fluffy towel, wrapping it around Emma. The little girl clung to her, water seeping into Sarah's cotton blouse. "That mark," Michael choked out, backing away until he hit the wall. "I've seen it before. I know what it means." Sarah hustled Emma to her room, helping her into warm pajamas while forcing her voice to stay cheerful. "How about we read 2 stories tonight, sweetheart? You can pick your favorites." But Emma, sensitive to the tension crackling in the air, was subdued as she pointed to her books. Later, after Emma had finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah confronted Michael in their bedroom. He paced like a caged animal, running his hands through his dark hair until it stood on end. "Explain yourself," Sarah demanded, keeping her voice low. "How could you even think about sending her back? She's our daughter." Michael's laugh was hollow. "Is she? Look at that birthmark, Sarah. It's exactly like—" He stopped abruptly, turning away to stare out the window at the gathering darkness. "Exactly like what?" Sarah pressed, but Michael shook his head, his shoulders rigid with tension. That night, Sarah lay awake, listening to Michael's uneven breathing beside her. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. The next morning, she called in sick to her teaching job, waiting until Michael left for work before beginning her investigation. That night, Sarah lay awake, listening to Michael's uneven breathing beside her. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. The next morning, she called in sick to her teaching job, waiting until Michael left for work before beginning her investigation. The house felt different in the morning quiet, with Emma still asleep and Michael's inexplicable reaction hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Sarah moved through the rooms they shared as a family, seeing them with new eyes. In Michael's home office, she hesitated before opening his desk drawer. The guilt of invading his privacy warred with her need to protect Emma. Inside, she found a stack of old photographs, their edges worn soft with handling. Most showed Michael in his college years, younger, more carefree, his smile unguarded in a way she rarely saw now. But it was the last photo that made her breath catch. Michael stood shirtless on a beach, and there, clear as day on his shoulder blade, was a crescent-shaped birthmark identical to Emma's. Sarah sank into his leather office chair, the photograph trembling in her hands. The statistical impossibility of such a matching mark struck her like a physical blow. She thought back to their adoption process, how Michael had been distant, letting her handle everything. Had he known something? Had he recognized Emma's name or her background information? The sound of small feet padding down the hallway snapped her back to the present. Emma appeared in the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant, her curls a wild nest from sleep. "Mommy," she asked, rubbing her eyes, "can we have pancakes?" Sarah quickly tucked the photo away, forcing a smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Would you like to help me mix the batter?" In the kitchen, watching Emma carefully measure flour with her tiny hands, Sarah felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. Whatever secrets Michael W. as keeping, whatever truth lay behind that birthmark, nothing could change the fact that Emma was her daughter now. Over the next few days, Sarah became a detective in her own home. She noted how Michael avoided bath time, how he flinched when Emma ran to hug him, how he spent longer hours at the office. She created a timeline of their adoption process, looking for any clues she might have missed. The breaking point came when she found an old letter tucked into a college yearbook, written in unfamiliar handwriting. "Michael, I need to tell you something important." It began, but the rest was missing. The date at the top matched the time period when Emma would have been conceived. Sarah waited until Emma was engrossed in her favorite cartoon before making the call. The DNA testing service promised discretion and quick results. All she needed was a few strands of hair from each of them. Getting Emma's was easy. A few strands from her hairbrush. Michael's came from his pillow. The waiting was excruciating. Sarah maintained their family routine, playdates at the park, story time before bed, Sunday morning pancakes, but everything felt hollow, performative. Michael remained withdrawn, working late, barely speaking during dinner. Emma, picking up on the tension, became clingy, bursting into tears at the smallest frustration. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. Sarah sat in her car in the grocery store parking lot, staring at her phone screen until the words blurred. The test confirmed what she had already suspected. Michael was Emma's biological father. The drive home was a blur. Sarah's mind raced with questions. How had this happened? Had Michael known all along? Why hadn't he said anything during the adoption process? The betrayal felt like a physical weight in her chest. She found Michael in his home office, typing away at his computer as if their world wasn't about to implode. Emma was at her weekly dance class with the neighbor's daughter, giving them a precious hour alone. When were you going to tell me? Sarah's voice was steady, despite the tremor in her hands as she placed the DNA results on his desk. Michael stared at the paper for a long moment, his face draining of color. I wasn't sure, he whispered finally. Don't lie to me, Sarah snapped. Not anymore? You recognized that birthmark the moment you saw it. You knew there was a possibility. He slumped in his chair, suddenly looking older than his years. There was someone, he admitted. In college. Jennifer. It was brief, just a few weeks before graduation. She sent me a letter saying she needed to talk, but I was already moving to Boston for my first job. I never followed up. I never knew. And when we started the adoption process, when you saw Emma's information, the name Jennifer appeared in her file, but it's such a common name. I told myself it couldn't be the same person. I convinced myself it was impossible. He ran a hand over his face. But when I saw that birthmark, Sarah paced the room, her thoughts whirling. So your solution was to send her back? Our daughter? After everything we've been through to become parents? I panicked, Michael said, his voice cracking. The guilt, the shock, it was too much. But Sarah, you have to understand. Understand what? She interrupted. That you'd rather abandon your own child than face the consequences of your past? That you'd hurt Emma, hurt me, just to avoid dealing with this? The sound of the front door opening cut through their argument. Emma's voice rang out, chattering excitedly about her dance class. Sarah took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. We're not done discussing this, she said quietly. But right now, our daughter needs her dinner and her bedtime story. And Michael, if you ever suggest sending her back again, you'll be the one leaving this house. The next few days passed in a fog of strained politeness and careful choreography. Sarah and Michael moved around each other like dancers following different music, connected only by their shared focus on keeping Emma's world stable. But in quiet moments, Sarah found herself watching them together, noting Emma's mannerisms that suddenly made sense. The way she furrowed her brow when concentrating, just like Michael, or how she talked with her hands when excited. The next few days passed in a fog of strained politeness and careful choreography. Sarah and Michael moved around each other like dancers following different music, connected only by their shared focus on keeping Emma's world stable. But in quiet moments, Sarah found herself watching them together, noting Emma's mannerisms that suddenly made sense. The way she furrowed her brow when concentrating, just like Michael, or how she talked with her hands when excited. Sarah reached out to her friend Rachel, a family law attorney, requesting an urgent consultation. Over coffee at a quiet cafe far from their neighborhood, Rachel explained the legal implications of their situation. The adoption is legitimate, Rachel assured her, stirring her latte thoughtfully. Michael's prior connection to Emma doesn't invalidate your parental rights. In fact, as her adoptive mother, you have equal standing in the eyes of the law. Sarah clutched her coffee cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. But what if he tries to use this to take her away from me? Rachel's response was firm. He signed away his parental rights when he didn't respond to Jennifer's attempts to contact him. Then he legally adopted Emma alongside you. If anything, this strengthens your position. The conversation with Rachel gave Sarah the courage to make her next move. That evening, after Emma was asleep, she confronted Michael in their living room. The space that had once felt so warm and inviting now seemed to echo with unspoken words. We need to talk about what happens next, she began, sitting in her favorite armchair, while Michael stood by the fireplace. I've spoken with a lawyer. Michael's shoulders tensed. Are you planning to leave me? I'm planning to protect our daughter, Sarah corrected. The question is, are you finally ready to be her father in more than just biology? The silence stretched between them, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Finally, Michael sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I've been a coward, he admitted, his voice rough. When I saw that birthmark, Everything I tried to forget came rushing back. Jennifer's letter, my choice to ignore it, all the years I might have had with Emma. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. But watching you with her, seeing how much she loves you, I realized I was making the same mistake again, running away instead of facing the truth. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes but forced them back. Emma deserves better than that. She deserves parents who will fight for her, not abandon her at the first sign of difficulty. I know, Michael whispered. I want to try to be better for both of you. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance of healing and adjustment. They found a family therapist who specialized in adoption issues, attending sessions both separately and together. Michael gradually opened up about his past, sharing stories of his own childhood and the fear of failure that had driven his initial reaction. Emma continued to bloom under their care, oblivious to the adult complexities swirling around her. She started preschool, making friends and bringing home artwork that covered the refrigerator. Her nightmares, frequent in the early days of adoption, became rare. She developed a particular love for the garden, helping Sarah plant flowers and vegetables, squealing with delight when the first tomatoes appeared. Michael began leaving work earlier, making it home for dinner most nights. He started joining them for bedtime stories, his voice growing more confident as he created different characters for each book. Sometimes, Sarah would pause in the doorway, watching them together, seeing the subtle similarities that now seemed so obvious. The way they both scrunched their noses when laughing, their shared love of solving puzzles. One Saturday morning, as they worked together in the garden, Emma looked up from her small watering can with serious eyes. "Daddy," she said, "why do you have the same moon as me?" Sarah and Michael exchanged glances. They had discussed this moment in therapy, preparing for when Emma might notice the matching birthmarks. Michael gently set down his trowel and lifted Emma onto his lap. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "families are connected in special ways. Our matching moons are like a sign that we were meant to find each other." Emma considered this, her small face thoughtful. "Does Mommy have a moon too?" "No, sweetheart," Sarah answered, moving to sit beside them. "But I have something just as special. I have you and Daddy in my heart." Emma beamed, apparently satisfied with this explanation. She wiggled free from Michael's lap, returning to her important work of watering the marigolds. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Sarah found Michael in his office, looking at old photographs. Without a word, she sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I found Jennifer," he said quietly, "through the adoption agency. She's happy we're together, the three of us. She wants to know if we'd be open to letters, maybe pictures sometimes." Sarah thought about it, remembering her own journey to motherhood, the different paths that had led them all here. "I think, when Emma's older, she might want to know her whole story, all the pieces that made her who she is." Michael nodded, his arm tightening around her. "We'll tell her together, about how love makes a family in all its complicated, beautiful ways." Outside their window, the garden they'd planted together flourished in the summer evening. Emma's laughter echoed in their memories, a sound that had become the heartbeat of their home. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but they would walk it together, guided by the love that had brought them here, a love stronger than blood, stronger than fear, stronger than the past. In their daughter's room, the crescent moon night light cast a gentle glow, a reminder that sometimes the most precious gifts come in unexpected packages, and that family is not just about shared marks on skin, but about the marks we leave on each other's hearts. In their daughter's room, the crescent moon night light cast a gentle glow, a reminder that sometimes the most precious gifts come in unexpected packages, and that family is not just about shared marks on skin, but about the marks we leave on each other's hearts. As months passed, their home transformed into a testament of their journey together. Emma's artwork began to tell stories of her own. Crayon drawings of three figures holding hands under a crescent moon, watercolor paintings of their garden in full bloom. Sarah started a memory book, filling it with photographs, pressed flowers from their garden, and small notes about their daily victories and challenges. Michael found himself drawn more and more to the garden, often spending weekend mornings teaching Emma about different plants while Sarah watched from the kitchen window, coffee in hand. The same patience he'd learned in tending to delicate seedlings seemed to transfer to his relationship with Emma. He no longer flinched when she mentioned the matching birthmarks, instead turning it into their special connection, their moon club, as Emma called it. Their first major test came during Emma's school's Father's Day celebration. The event brought up complicated emotions for everyone involved. Emma proudly introduced Michael as her daddy, but later that night, she asked questions about her first daddy. Sarah and Michael exchanged glances before sitting down with her on the living room couch, the same spot where they'd had so many difficult conversations of their own. "Family is like your garden, sweetheart," Sarah explained, pulling Emma close. "Sometimes seeds come from one place, but grow somewhere else. And that's okay, because what matters is the love and care they receive where they're planted," Michael added, his voice gentle. "And just like how some flowers need extra sunshine and others need more shade, families can look different and still be perfect." Emma considered this, twirling a strand of her honey blonde hair. "Like how Tommy has two mommies, and Maria lives with her grandmother?" "Exactly," Sarah smiled, feeling pride surge through her chest at their daughter's understanding. The conversation with Jennifer evolved gradually, beginning with emails exchanged through the adoption agency. She shared medical history that might be important for Emma's future and sent thoughtful letters that they tucked away for when Emma was older. Jennifer's respect for their family unit helped ease some of Sarah's lingering fears about her place in Emma's life. As their family stabilized, Sarah and Michael began to rediscover each other. Date nights became a regular occurrence, with Emma happily spending evenings with her favorite babysitter, Rachel's teenage daughter Ashley. They took cooking classes together, learning to make dishes from around the world that they'd later recreate with Emma's help. The kitchen became their family's heart, filled with laughter and the occasional disaster when Emma's enthusiasm led to spilled ingredients. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, Emma perched on her special stepping stool to reach the counter. Michael caught Sarah's eye over their daughter's head. Emma was carefully measuring flour for their pizza dough, her tongue stuck out in concentration, looking so much like Michael in that moment that Sarah's heart squeezed. "Remember when you used to measure everything for me?" Emma asked Sarah, referring to their early baking adventures. "Now I'm big enough to do it myself." "You sure are, Moonbeam," Michael replied, using the nickname that had once caused him such pain, but now carried only love. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah found Michael in their bedroom, looking at the family photos on the dresser. One in particular caught his attention, a candid shot Rachel had taken at Emma's 5th birthday party. In it, Emma sat between them, frosting smeared across her face, all three of them laughing at some forgotten joke. "I almost lost this," Michael said softly, touching the frame. "I almost let fear rob us of everything we have now." Sarah wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "But you didn't. We're stronger for having faced it together." The next morning, they started a new tradition. Every Sunday, they would add to their family storybook, each taking turns writing down memories, hopes, and dreams. Emma's contributions were often drawings, stick figures having adventures, always under a crescent moon. Michael wrote about teaching Emma to ride her bike, about the pride he felt watching her overcome her fears. Sarah wrote about quiet moments, Emma and Michael falling asleep together during movie night, the sound of their laughter drifting up from the garden, the way Emma's hand felt in hers during their walks to school. Their story wasn't perfect, but it was beautifully, authentically theirs. The crescent birthmark that had once threatened to tear them apart had become a symbol of their resilience, a reminder that love doesn't always follow a straight path, but finds its way home nonetheless. As summer turned to fall, they began planning Emma's 6th birthday party. The theme, chosen by Emma herself, was moon and stars. Sarah found herself smiling at the irony as she hung silver decorations from the ceiling and arranged star-shaped sandwiches on platters. Michael set up a telescope in the backyard, ready to share his newfound interest in astronomy with Emma and her friends. "Mommy," Emma called from the doorway, already in her party dress covered in silver moons, "can we plant moonflowers in the garden? Ashley says they only bloom at night." Sarah caught Michael's eye across the room, seeing in his smile the same joy that filled her heart. "Of course we can, sweetheart. We'll add them to our special garden, right next to the sunflowers. Sarah caught Michael's eye across the room, seeing in his smile the same joy that filled her heart. "Of course we can, sweetheart. We'll add them to our special garden, right next to the sunflowers." The birthday party became a celebration not just of Emma's 6 years, but of their journey as a family. Children ran through the backyard, their faces painted with stars and moons, while parents gathered around the refreshment table, commenting on the elaborate decorations. Rachel, who had been such a vital support through their struggles, helped serve the moon-shaped cake, stealing glances at Sarah with a knowing smile. As dusk approached, Michael gathered the children around the telescope. His voice carried across the yard as he pointed out constellations, telling stories about ancient sailors who used the stars to find their way home. Emma sat on his shoulders, her party dress glittering in the fading light, occasionally adding her own imaginative details to his tales. "And see that bright star?" Michael pointed. "That's the North Star. No matter where you are, it helps you find your way. Like how you and Mommy found me?" Emma asked, her small hands patting Michael's head. The question caught him off guard, but his voice remained steady. "Exactly like that, Moonbeam. Some things in life are meant to guide us together." Later that night, after the last guest had left and Emma had finally fallen asleep, surrounded by her new toys, Sarah and Michael sat on their back porch. The evening air was heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine, and somewhere in the distance, crickets played their nighttime symphony. "I was thinking," Michael said, breaking their comfortable silence, "about Jennifer's latest letter." Sarah turned to face him, noting the thoughtful expression she'd come to know so well. "The one about wanting to meet Emma when she's ready." Michael nodded, reaching for Sarah's hand. I think it might be good for all of us. Not now, but maybe when she's a bit older. Emma should know her whole story, including the parts that were hard for us." Sarah squeezed his hand, remembering how far they'd come from those first terrifying moments in the bathroom. "We'll know when the time is right. Emma has a way of letting us know what she needs." The following weeks brought new challenges and joys. Emma started first grade, coming home each day, bursting with stories about her new friends and discoveries. Her teacher, Ms. Johnson, quickly picked up on Emma's fascination with the moon, incorporating celestial themes into her reading assignments. One evening, as Sarah helped Emma with her homework, their conversation drifted to family trees, a project for school. Emma's brow furrowed as she studied the blank branches on her paper. "Can I put Jennifer on my tree?" she asked quietly. "Ashley says sometimes trees have extra branches." Sarah felt her heart swell with pride at her daughter's intuitive understanding. "Of course you can, sweetheart. Family trees are like real trees. They grow exactly the way they need to." That night, they worked together to create Emma's unique family tree. Michael contributed old photos, including one of Jennifer he'd kept from college. They added Rachel and Ashley on a special branch labeled Heart Family, Emma's term for the people who weren't related by blood but were essential to their story. The completed project became a conversation piece in Emma's classroom, leading to discussions about different types of families. Ms. Johnson later told Sarah that Emma's openness had helped other children feel more comfortable sharing their own unique family stories. As autumn deepened, their garden underwent its own transformation. The moonflowers Emma had wished for at her birthday party took root, their silvery blooms opening each evening like tiny mirrors of the crescent marks that had brought their family together. Michael built a small bench near the flower bed, and often, on clear nights, the three of them would sit there, counting stars and sharing dreams. "Do you think Jennifer likes moonflowers too?" Emma asked one such evening, her head resting against Sarah's shoulder. "We could ask her," Michael suggested, his voice gentle. "Would you like to write her a letter about our garden?" Emma's face lit up at the idea, and the next day, they began what would become another family tradition. Together, they wrote letters to Jennifer, sharing stories about Emma's adventures, her growing love of astronomy, and the garden that bloomed under the same moon that marked both father and daughter. Jennifer's responses were thoughtful and kind, always respectful of the family bonds that had formed. She sent pressed flowers from her own garden in Colorado, and Emma carefully added them to the family storybook, creating a bridge between her past and present. As winter approached, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The fear and uncertainty of those early days had given way to a deeper understanding of what family truly meant. Their home had become a testament to the power of love to heal and transform. Each room holding memories of challenges overcome and joy discovered. One snowy evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Emma announced her latest career aspiration. "I want to be an adoption lawyer," she declared, carefully spearing a piece of broccoli. "Like Aunt Rachel, so I can help other families find each other." Sarah and Michael exchanged glances, their eyes meeting over the steaming plates. In their daughter's words, they heard echoes of their own growth, their own learning about the endless ways love could manifest. "That's a beautiful dream, Moonbeam," Michael said, reaching across the table to ruffle Emma's hair. "But you know what? You're already helping families understand love just by being yourself." "That's a beautiful dream, Moonbeam," Michael said, reaching across the table to ruffle Emma's hair. "But you know what? You're already helping families understand love just by being yourself." Emma beamed at her father's words, the same crinkle appearing around her eyes that Michael got when he was truly happy. Sarah watched them, feeling the warmth of their shared moment spread through the kitchen like sunlight. Winter settled around their home like a soft blanket, bringing with it new traditions and deeper connections. Emma discovered ice skating, and their weekends soon filled with trips to the local rink. Michael, who had played hockey in college, taught her how to glide backwards, their matching birthmarks peeking out from beneath scarves and winter coats. The holiday season brought an unexpected gift in the form of a package from Jennifer. Inside was a handmade quilt, each square telling a different part of Emma's story, from the crescent moon that connected her to Michael, to the flowers in their garden, to the constellations they loved to watch. Attached was a note explaining that Jennifer had started making it when she first learned of her pregnancy and had continued adding to it over the years, hoping it would someday reach her daughter. Emma ran her fingers over the stitching, tracing the patterns with wonder. "It's like a story blanket," she whispered. That night, she insisted on sleeping under it, and Sarah noticed how Michael lingered during bedtime stories, his hand resting on one particular square that showed a mother releasing a paper boat into a river, Jennifer's artistic representation of her own difficult choice. As winter deepened, their home became a haven of warmth and acceptance. Emma's friends from school began gravitating to their house, drawn by the atmosphere of openness and love. Sarah and Michael found themselves hosting impromptu sleepovers and weekend crafting sessions, their living room often strewn with glitter and construction paper as Emma and her friends created their own stories. One such afternoon, while helping the children make Valentine's Day cards, Sarah overheard Emma explaining family to her best friend, Lily. "See, I have 3 parents who love me," Emma said matter-of-factly, carefully cutting out a heart shape. "My mom and dad here, and my birth mom Jennifer, who lives in Colorado. It's like having extra love, not less." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, remembering the fear and uncertainty that had once clouded their family's beginning. Now, hearing Emma speak with such confidence about her identity, she knew they had made the right choices along their difficult path. The arrival of spring brought new growth to their garden and their family. Jennifer had begun sending regular updates about her life, including photos of her own garden in Colorado. Emma delighted in comparing the different growing seasons, and together they started a joint garden journal, sharing pictures and pressing flowers from both states between its pages. Michael, watching Emma's excitement over each new letter, finally voiced something he'd been considering for months. "What if we planned a trip to Colorado this summer? All of us, together?" The suggestion hung in the air like a soap bubble, delicate but full of possibility. Sarah found herself nodding slowly, seeing in her mind's eye the completion of a circle that had begun with that first shocking discovery of the matching birthmarks. "I think," she said carefully, "that would be perfect." They planned the trip together, marking maps and researching attractions near Jennifer's hometown. Emma threw herself into learning about Colorado's flowers and wildlife, creating detailed lists of what she hoped to see. Michael reached out to Jennifer, and together they arranged a meeting that would respect everyone's comfort levels and boundaries. As spring melted into early summer, their garden burst into full bloom. The moonflowers that had started as Emma's birthday wish now climbed gracefully up the trellis Michael had built, their silvery blossoms opening each evening like tiny beacons. Sarah often found Emma there at dusk, watching the flowers unfurl while chattering about their upcoming trip. "Do you think Jennifer's garden has moonflowers too?" she asked one evening, helping Sarah water the beds. "Why don't you write and ask her?" Sarah suggested, adjusting the spray of the hose. "Maybe we could bring her some seeds from our garden when we visit." Emma's face lit up at the idea. Then our gardens would be connected, just like us. That night, as they sat on their garden bench under the stars, Sarah looked at her family and marveled at how far they'd come. Michael was pointing out constellations to Emma. Their silhouettes merged into one as she sat on his lap. The crescent moon hung above them, a celestial echo of the marks that had once threatened to tear them apart but had instead become a symbol of their unique bond.